Okay. Good morning, everyone. We are Group 1, and our topic for today is gay, lesbian, and transgender students in K through 12 education. My name is German Alvarez, and I am affiliated with the English department.
My name is Megan.E, and I am with the Mathematics Department.
My name is Morgan.K, and I'm with the Agriculture Education Department.
And the purpose of today's presentation is that we would like for educators to be a bit more aware of the LGBTQ aspects of school and how to handle them in the future, such as some of the laws that are implemented to help LGBTQ students, how to deal with bullying, how to deal with mental health, and just creating a better environment for our LGBTQ students that we will have in the future.
So when and how has LGBTQ awareness been brought into K through 12 schools? We will be discussing the history of K through 12 schools. We will be discussing the history of LGBTQ awareness in K through 12 schools. So in 2011, California became the first state to require schools to teach LGBTQ history. For those of you who don't know, LGBTQ is lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, or questioning. And Governor Jerry Brown signed into California law the Fair, Accurate, Inclusive, and Respectful Education Act. This is also known as the FAIR Act. This act expands the state's education code, requiring that the roles and contributions of LGBTQ plus individuals and people with disabilities be part of history and social studies instruction. In 2016, the California State Board of Education approved a statewide social studies curriculum framework, which included the evolution of gay rights and lesbian and gay figures' contributions in history. In 2017, the board approved 10 textbooks that followed the framework. The process of approving these textbooks took a while because it is very hard to find textbooks with LGBTQ curriculum in them. So LGBTQ resources started sending textbooks to schools that would like to include this in their curriculum. In a 2013 survey, it was reported that 9% of the 8,574 respondents of students were in classes where LGBTQ topics were taught. In a 2019 Harris poll, it was reported that 37% of respondents would be uncomfortable if they found out that their child had a lesson involving LGBTQ plus history. This is why it has been very difficult to involve LGBTQ curriculum in K through 12 schools because multiple parents are not comfortable with their child learning this topic. GLSEN's 2019 National School Climate Survey found that 19.4% of respondents had been taught positive representations of LGBTQ plus people, history, or events in their schools. And in a 2019 California survey, nearly 10 years after the FAIR Act was passed, it was reported that 31% of students were being taught LGBTQ plus history. After the FAIR Act was passed, advocates hoped the bill would lead to fair and complete learning about the contributions of LGBTQ people throughout history. However, the FAIR Act was roadblocked for multiple years because there were people who didn't want this act to be passed. So therefore, only less than 20% of teachers integrate LGBTQ history in California. This is partly due to the fact that some teachers feel uncomfortable teaching these topics because they do not feel fully supported within their school districts. We will mention later the Equality Act, which can help change this in schools.
Now, as for the inclusivity of schools, such as the FAIR Act, which does implement this curriculum for LGBTQ students, it kind of gives them a more belonging within the school. But no matter what, there will always be some aspects of LGBTQ students that just can't be ignored. And we hope that we get to learn a bit more, such as the mental health of LGBTQ students, the constant bullying, curriculum, and other such topics. Now, as for the mental health of LGBTQ students, bullying towards LGBTQ students and the lack of acceptance still stands as one of the biggest catalysts for poor mental health in these students. This lack of acceptance is present in all schools, but especially in schools with laws that prevent LGBTQ people from being seen in a positive light. Now, found in Abreu et al. 2016, these laws direct school officials to take a neutral position about sexual and gender identity or outright just prohibit any school discussion and services, including counseling, to promote the well-being of sexual and gender minorities. Now, these laws, although their names are quite outlandish, they do have quite a real impact, such as the no promo homo laws and the don't say gay laws. Since the year 2015, 9 states in the United States have implemented these laws. And as we've discussed, these laws don't all the time just block LGBTQ curriculum. That is also a very bad thing for the acceptance of LGBTQ students. But one of the biggest impacts that it has is that LGBTQ curriculum just cannot be taught in a positive light. It can be taught in a neutral light, but not a negative light, which is kind of a positive. But if nothing is talked in a positive light, then we can never really make positive or make good connections with our LGBTQ students. Now, schools are meant to be safe environments for our students, but as found in Abreu, schools are hostile environments for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and questioning LGBTQ students, and as a result, these students tend to have lower GPAs, fewer plans to pursue post-secondary education, and unsurprisingly higher rates of depression and lower self-esteem. I mean, can we really expect anything less when most of the curriculum or the environment that they are in feels as if they're being alienated, not only through the curriculum, but through people? And this is all through a lack of understanding of the LGBTQ community. And with this lack of acceptance, the LGBTQ students come with a lack of morale, which results in either higher rates of depression, or it can also result in, as we've said, lower GPAs due to low efficacy in lessons due to their just demeanors or their moods during the day. And in some rare cases, but it does happen a lot, this can result in truancy due to lack of feeling safe at schools. And this truancy stems from one of the biggest aspects or negative aspects of the LGBTQ community within schools. Doesn't really have to do with them, but it has to do something that is done to them. Now, this feeling of alienation due to one's identity can lead to isolation from others and lower motivation in school. Say, for example, if you go to school and you're part of a minority and you never really get brought up during class, you never feel included during class, well, then that could kind of put you in a very far off point in the class where you don't really feel like you belong since you're so othered. And including the identity of students through curriculum is a prime way to increase students' morale and engagement. Now, as for some of the other topics, such as mathematics or the sciences, it is a bit more tougher to implement LGBTQ curriculum. But as for the social sciences, such as history or English, I believe that it is much easier and it is much more important to include LGBTQ curriculum, such as in the English department, using articles and texts that include the an LGBTQ topic, such as putting them in a better light or bringing more understanding to the community. And also, such as in history classes, we could implement the study of LGBTQ historical figures with showing success stories or how some people in the LGBTQ community, how they've impacted the world in a positive light. And to do this with the curriculum, it shows our students that we care about them, that we include them in the curriculum, that we know they exist, and that we acknowledge them. Now, California students who reported that they learned about LGBTQ issues at school said that their schools were safer and that they reported less teasing and social aggression and less LGBTQ bullying. This found in Russell et al. 2010. Now, this inclusion all stems to kind of a better understanding or understanding your peers better because of the curriculum that's being taught. If you never learn about your peers, then you'll just start to other them, and othering leads to this kind of bullying. Now, when students are provided with relevant curriculum that reflects their personal experience, they are likely to be more engaged as active learners and develop greater understanding of the material, said Snap et al. 2015. And as it's true with any student, if he or she does not form some kind of connection to what is being taught, then the result will most likely be disengagement from the lesson. And I think, as Snap says, I think that the only way you can really achieve in high schools is if you feel comfortable with yourself and you feel competent and you feel that you can approach your teachers and you can say things in class. This, as I've said, can be done by actually including aspects of the LGBTQ community in the classroom, such as through curriculum. When students feel as if they're included in the classroom, then they're more likely to be engaged, they're more likely to participate, and through that eagerness to participate, they can perform better. Now, there are many aspects of curriculum for LGBTQ students, but one thing that stands out, or one thing that is usually left aside, is the aspect of sex ed curriculum. Now, many schools do implement LGBTQ aspects in the sex ed curriculum, but many schools, if but and very many, leave it untaught. This gap, as says Cruiser 2019, this gap in education leaves everyone at risk, but puts LGBTQ plus youth at a higher risk of dangerous outcomes from unsafe sex. Now, risk-filled behavior can be avoided with the proper education regardless of sexual orientation. And with LGBTQ students being more at risk, or gay and lesbian students being more at risk of contracting such viruses like HIV, AIDS, or any other number of STDs, it's important that we do include this curriculum within sexual education for all students, because we can't just inform students about one thing, but just leave a very big piece of vital information for another group of students. And to leave it out is as if we don't really care about them or we just left them to the side. And as we've said, including a student in the curriculum shows them that we care and that we want them to succeed. Although in a 2015 study from the Public Religion Research Institute, it found that only 12% of millennial sex education classes discussed same-sex relationships. Although this was in 2015, that is still a very low and alarming number that only 12% of our country's students were taught LGBTQ aspects within sexual education. And finally, we'll be getting into one of the biggest aspects or the biggest negative aspect of the LGBTQ communities within schools, that being the bullying and harassment of LGBTQ students. Now, bullying and harassment are an everyday occurrence for many students, but as seen in a study done with a Seattle school or within Seattle schools, LGBTQ students run a much higher chance of being on the receiving end of several types of harassment, such as name calling, all the way up to physical harassment or even death threats. A study of several schools nationwide that use students eh, involved in the GSA or the Gay Straight Alliance that is implemented in many high schools revealed that 71% of students who frequently heard the word gay used in a negative way at school, which is a lot, of those, 91% feeling reported that they felt distressed by verbal harassment. 75% of them reported verbal harassment. 49% of them reported experiencing electronic harassment such as text messages or harassment over social media such as Twitter or Facebooks. And over a third of them reported that they were being physically harassed, such as being pushed, being shoved. And although it is the lowest number, it is still alarming to see that there is this many students. 16.5% of those students were reporting that they were being physically assaulted, punched, kicked, or in very rare but extreme cases, injured with a weapon. And this is something that we just can't overlook, that this many students are being harassed or even physically hurt because of this lack of understanding between students, this othering of LGBTQ students. Now, as I've mentioned before, there are laws that have been sort of catalysts for this kind of lack of understanding between students, such as what I've mentioned, the no promo homo laws in some states such as Alabama, Arizona, Louisiana, Minnesota, Mississippi, Oklahoma, South Carolina, Texas, and Utah. And these laws, as I said, prevent LGBTQ curriculum from being anything more than just neutral. It doesn't really paint anyone in a positive light. It doesn't bring understanding to their fellow LGBTQ peers in a positive light so that they can get along with each other and know what it's like to be them and know that what they're going through instead of just disregarding them and othering them. Now, as I said, this contributes to the lack of understanding these kinds of laws, it, the lack of understanding between the LGBTQ community in schools and other students. Lack of understanding leads to othering and eventually bullying. Now, a recommendation by Hillard is to implement a training for teachers on how to create safer school climates. And this is something we would be advocating for, such as teaching teachers, especially how to intervene when there are homophobic acts at school, such as when someone makes a homophobic remark, a teacher could step in and tell that student or also tell it in front of the class about what he just said was wrong and that how we can do to correct it. And another big and great way to address bullying is through school-wide interventions, such as assemblies that tell this whole school on a certain topic, such as bullying for LGBTQ students. And as their efficacy for lowering the rates of bullying are attested by Hillard et al. And Abreu et al., in which many students who reported having these kinds of assemblies inside of their schools said that they felt a lot safer. They felt a lot more understood. And they actually reported lower rates of bullying between the students.
So I'm going to kick off my section with the controversy regarding LGBTQ curriculum to schools. Should we allow teachers to be teaching this? And some of the reasons why people think, yes, we should allow teachers to do it, and some of the reasons why we don't believe teachers should be allowed to teach it. I kind of want you guys to think about it for yourselves, whether you believe whether or not we should be teaching some LGBTQ curriculum to your own classes as future educators. Would you allow it for yourself to be taught? Would you allow it for like your brothers or sisters or even your own kids? I know it's just like kind of a sticky subject and most people think it's not a big deal. Yeah, teach it, but there are, especially because we are in California, but especially when we move other places, it is a huge deal and something just to consider. We're going to stay pretty neutral on the subject, but we're going to listen to both sides and then kind of go over at the end what you think. So let's kick it off. Some of the reasons why schools do not offer curriculum that include LGBT topics. So these are some of the reasons why people have said that they don't want their kids learning it or teachers don't want to teach it. One of the main things is an unsupportive administration. I know as a new teacher, why would you want to rock the boat? I'm not going to teach something controversial to my students because it's so easy just to have me not come back next year, especially if my administration doesn't support me. So that's why it's really important to have an administration that backs you up on what you're teaching and comes into your classroom and views it, what you're teaching. Many teachers, even older teachers, don't want to rock the boat either, and they don't want to just start teaching controversial subjects that students can go home and tell their parents, oh, my teacher taught me XYZ at school today. And teachers love to talk to administration, and when an administration doesn't love what you're teaching, that's when you get to hear it. So many teachers will not enter into the domain of using curriculum that includes LGBT related topics because their administrators will not support them. So it's really good to have an administration that supports you. It can be hard to justify teaching a controversial subject if a student or parent complains and you do not have the support of administration. Again, like I kind of mentioned earlier, you just really want to make sure your administration backs you up so that when parents do complain about anything, they know exactly what they're talking about and they have your back. Another huge thing that happens and why we don't offer curriculum with LGBT topics is parent pushback. A lot of parents do not want their students kids learning about LGBT related topics. There are small groups of parents in districts and large groups of parents in other districts who do not want their children or any other children exposed to LGBT related topics in school. I put this as the last bullet point, but I think it's important to touch on in the beginning of this is they believe that's indoctrination. They believe that when students hear about a LGBT relationship and hear more about some of the practices they use, that they are more likely to become an LGBT person. School leaders and teachers have seen parents pull their children from schools who participate in the Day of Silence. That's saying, hey, Jimmy, you don't have to go to school today because everyone's doing the Day of Silence. And I don't support that. And so obviously schools don't really want that to happen. They want kids to go to school. So not only do they get an education, but they also get funding. So that's, again, kind of tying it back to administration. Some parents bring their own values into public school settings and want schools to abide those values. Obviously, it's pretty religious backed in a lot of ways, and so they bring in those values into the school setting, which again, we're staying pretty neutral on the topic, but that's just what happens. And they want the schools to abide by those same values. And sometimes it doesn't always align, and that's when we kind of run into issues. All right. Some other reasons why we do not offer the curriculum LGBT in schools is educators don't know how. if you're not taught to teach a controversial subject, you don't, I mean, you can try your best, but if you don't know how, it's really hard for you to just jump in and try your best. Many teachers and leaders don't know where to start. I wouldn't even know where to start. After doing this presentation, I learned a lot about LGBT curriculum and some of the things that they offer in different subjects. And there's a lot of resources out there, but educators don't know how to get started on that. And if, again, they don't have administration and parents backing them up, why would they go look for that? Explaining things to young students, saying that we tolerate or accept people is pretty commonly used. And this kind of offends more people than it helps. Saying that we tolerate and accept you makes them feel alienated, obviously, to begin with. And so saying, hey, you're accepted is like, I know I'm a regular person too. So that's some of the things that people have commonly used that maybe we should kind of steer away from. Teachers have begun making clearly written code of conduct that have disciplinary against students who harass or bully classmates based on gender or sexual orientation to support LGBT students in the classroom. Definitely some teachers have done this. They have clearly written out exactly what would happen or what does happen if they bully each other based on any of these things, their gender, sexual orientation, whatever it may be. Personally, when I went to high school, even in California, this was not a thing. Our rules were basically respect each other. And obviously that can tie into this, but I personally have never even seen this. And so this kind of opened my eyes a little bit to some of the things that we can, as future educators, can implement in the future if we would like to. Policies and codes of conduct set the foundation for supporting teachers and leaders when there is a parent pushback. This can tie into everything. If there's parent pushback, your administration should have some sort of policy regarding that. So it doesn't necessarily just mean shutting you down or just taking out the curriculum altogether. It's maybe just looking into it a little bit more, and obviously the policy would outline it a little bit better than I ever could right now. This is also provides parents of LGBT students support for when administrators ignore the bullying and harassment, and now they have policies clearly written. So I know, as if you are a parent, you can say all you'd like about the subject, but it's a little different when it's your own kid in that situation. This at least gives some LGBT parents a little bit of, hey, we do know there's a problem and we're here to back up your child against bullying that happens to them. So that really helps them too. Educators do not have curriculum to teach the subject. Obviously we listed out the states. They don't offer it, they don't allow it, they will not teach it. But some states do, and they just don't have the curriculum offered. Looking into this subject, there's a ton of stuff online that a lot of different organizations have come out with regarding curriculum to be taught to students. It doesn't necessarily have to be like in your face, giant, just about this. It kind of ties it in a little bit more subtly, and it could be anything like reading a book in your class or that has just gay people in it or anything like that. Those are just some examples, but they give it a little bit more of a way to go about it. Most educators were not taught in college or their career how to teach the subject, so we can't really expect them just to jump in into the deep end with it. The older generations of teachers were especially not exposed to this new way of thinking, so it's kind of cool that we offer curriculum for everyone. Doesn't matter what age you are still an educator and you're affecting all of these youth lives, so it's kind of cool to look into. And teachers, educators were running into the same problem and they didn't know how to fix it. So teachers were running into the same problems over and over again, and they did not know how to teach the subject. So, and kind of goes in a circle, because if my educator in college doesn't know how to teach me how to teach them, it's just a huge circle of not knowing how to teach each other. LGBT topics. So we can break the cycle if we'd like to. Yeah. So next slide. Some more reasons why schools do offer curriculum with LGBT topics. So this is the other side of the spectrum. A reason why they offer this is it creates a safe space. I know this kind of gets thrown around quite a bit. Everyone's like, oh, do you need a safe space? I don't know if that's for everyone, but I've definitely heard that, and it's kind of joked about, but some students really do need a safe space just to feel not bullied, not judged, and this is a reason or a place that we can do it is school. Teachers in the Madison Metropolitan School District were given curriculum and training on how to teach K-12 students about LGBT education. So this was obviously really cool because they not only gave them the curriculum, but they gave them training on how to teach it so that teachers weren't just thrown in. Teachers put up signs saying that their classroom was a safe space. I've seen a lot of teachers do this recently, and something that we can definitely look into as future educators as well is just putting up a little sign that says, hey, like everyone's welcome here, everyone, this is a judgment-free zone, and we all love each other. And I know a sign doesn't necessarily the rules and everything else, but it's a start. I mean, it's something that students will definitely see and feel maybe just a little bit better in your classroom. And the teachers that had this training and introduced this curriculum, apparently they said they noticed a lot less homophobic slurs. So that's the you're gay or whatever slurs. They said they actually didn't see as much, and it was noticeably different because they were more educated on the topic. And I feel like that's every aspect of life for everyone. If you're more educated, you're less likely to judge and make fun of a subject. Another thing is avoidable struggles. These students, they're more likely, we kind of went over it, to experience bullying and harassment. So this is a great way to just avoid that if we educate these students on the subject. And studies show more understanding and education about the subject makes students less likely to harass each other on the subject. I kind of went over that a little bit in the last little bullet point. If you know more about something, you're less likely to make fun of it. And so that's just another example of that. If you know someone or are related to someone who's gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, you're less likely to make fun of the subject. Personally, I have had experienced this. I didn't bully anyone, but I just didn't know anything about the subject of LGBT, but my sister actually came out as like lesbian, but that made me open my eyes a little bit more to the subject and less likely to ever like judge someone in the future because I'm now related to someone, and I'm sure all of you guys can relate to that. If you know someone, whether it's a family member or friend that has, we don't want them to obviously feel bullied or harassed because we love them. So it's a little bit different aspect, or for you to look at it a little bit differently. And it's less likely that you will harass someone in the future because you know and love someone that has this or that is LGBT. All right. Another set of reasons why schools do offer this is comprehensive sex education benefits all students, including LGBT youth. So this is for everyone. It's not just for LGBT students. We're not singling them out. It's for just everyone, just to be more informed. And there's not really anything we can say badly about that. If like everyone's the same, everyone's equal, right? There is an abundant evidence that comprehensive sex education is effective in reducing high-risk sexual behaviors, promoting safer sex practices, and preventing pregnancy and sexually transmitted infections. This is for everyone. If you are more knowledgeable about the subject of STDs and high-risk sexual behaviors, then you know not to do certain things and what to do in that situation. So this is just tying in the LGBT aspect. It should be just everyone should know a lot about that. So then when they're in that situation, they can make sure they're doing the right stuff. Meanwhile, no abstinence-only program has been proven effective at achieving those results or significantly delayed sexual activity for their intended purpose. I feel like we've kind of known this. Just don't do it is not working. So this just at least makes kids more knowledgeable about when they do it. I know in this class, we watched a video about some of middle school confessions, is I believe it was what it was. And these kids were like 12 years old and they were having sexual experiences. So they hopefully are educated. If not, and this is some curriculum that we can use to educate them so that they know what to do in these situations and they aren't just saying no, because apparently that's not working. Spotty coverage and irregular standards are kind of being used, and comprehensive sex education does not reach nearly enough youth, resulting in dangerous ignorance. So people are being taught sex standards, but it's not always the same in every district and every school site. So it's kind of, it would be nice if everyone just taught the same and had the same curriculum and standards all the way across the board. So there's no excuse about, hey, I never learned that, or I didn't know that. So then more students will know and be more informed about things. Among those ages, 18 to 19, which is pretty young, that's right after you graduate high school, 41% say they know little to nothing about condoms, which is a little worrisome. And 75% say they know little to nothing about the contraceptive pill. Obviously, this is not a sex education taught or what I'm teaching you about, but it's a little worrisome that they don't know anything about these things that are very helpful. LGBT youth are disproportionately affected by negative sexual health outcomes. So not only is everyone just at having a hard time with sexual health, but these people are especially at risk because young men who have sex with men or who identify as gay or bisexual account for more than 2/3 of new HIV infections among people 13 to 29 and 2/3 of new syphilis cases. So that means that they are the ones who are spreading it a lot. And not to put them in like a corner or anything, but it's just really prevalent with that group of people. And so that they aren't educated about this subject is pretty worrisome. And how do students feel about this? So how do we feel about curriculum being introduced in school? And this is like from students themselves, and they asked a bunch of high schoolers in California, 26 high schoolers in California, how they viewed the LGBT curriculum that was introduced. So they just kind of asked their opinion on it and kind of got their feel for it. I think this is really important because I know I'm going to go into high school and I'd actually really like to know how students feel about this new curriculum being taught. The history and health classes were the ones that were introduced this subject, and the LGBT curriculum was just slowly introduced to them. Students who experience inclusive curriculum describe the experience as having meaning for them in a number of positive ways, which suggests the LGBTQ inclusive curriculum has the potential to promote agency and change. This was a peer-reviewed study, so they didn't steer them in any sort of direction. They just asked them, how do you feel about it? And these 26 high school students actually had really positive responses, which is pretty cool. It showed importance of teaching culturally relevant curriculum in schools and considers the need for queer and social justice frameworks that offer regular opportunities for students to challenge heteronormativity and critique their very idea of normal. Basically, what that was meaning to me was that they are just challenging anything that they thought was normal before, and they are giving it a different meaning for these young students. When lessons were taught, they typically occurred in social sciences and humanities classes and appeared to draw upon suggestions from past research on how to incorporate LGBTQ issues into social studies courses. It wasn't introduced to every single class, it was just a few of them, and they slowly introduced it pretty subtly. And despite the apparent lack of criticalness, students articulated the ways that LGBTQ inclusive curriculum improved their learning and well-being, and were genuinely thrilled that teachers taught lessons that were relevant to their lives and experiences. And that last line really kind of just shows that students, not that they always care what we're saying, but they like when things are relevant to them, and they like that things that affect their lives especially are being taught. And so this affects a lot of students these days, and so they really like to hear about it and be more informed about it. So it's kind of cool that students like to hear about themselves, which I get. Next slide. And these are just some of the statistics of LGBT students in school. These are some of them that I found when I was doing research. They just really jumped out at me and were just really apparent to opening the eyes of all of us future educators, hopefully, on how prevalent this issue really is. 55.5% of LGBT students felt unsafe at school based on their sexual orientation. So that's more than half of students that are LGBT didn't feel safe at school, which should never be the case. 30.3% of LGBT students missed at least one entire day of school in the past month because they felt unsafe or uncomfortable. That's a lot of school. Over a tenth, 10.6% missed 4 or more days in the last month. So that adds up very quickly, especially if you're missing 4 or more days every single month. Over a third avoided gender segregated spaces in school because they felt unsafe or uncomfortable. These were our bathrooms and locker rooms, which everyone has access to. So it just shows that they don't feel that they are safe in those public areas. Most reported avoiding school functions and extracurricular activities, 68.1% and 61.2% respectively, because they felt unsafe or uncomfortable. I know my major, especially agriculture, it's all extracurriculars. Like you're outside school doing all these different projects and things like that. So that just showed well over half don't feel welcome in these activities, and that they don't want to go to these functions. So just in the future, hopefully we make it a little more welcoming. And 74.1% of LGBT students were verbally harassed. They were called names or threatened in the past year because of their sexual orientation. So that is like 3/4 of them have been called names and threatened in the past year, which isn't even that long, just 1 year because of their sexual orientation. 36.2% were physically harassed. They were pushed or shoved in the past year. Again, the past year because of their sexual orientation. And 16.5% were physically assaulted, which is punched, kicked, or injured with a weapon in the past year because of their sexual orientation. 49% of LGBT students experience electronic harassment in the last year. This is really common with social media these days. 49% is a huge number, but I know a lot of students have had some form of harassment over just online. And 56.7% of LGBT students who were harassed or assaulted in school did not report the incident to school staff, most commonly because they doubted the effective intervention would occur or the situation would become worse if reported. So they don't even feel comfortable telling a staff or school member about what's happening. And so it's kind of, for us to interview them, we have to see it, and that's not always the case. 61.6% of students who did report an incident said the school staff did nothing in response. I bolded that because just don't be that teacher in the future. So yeah, that's some statistics from LGBT students in school.
Okay. So what does the future look like in K through 12 schools? We talked about the past and the present, and as future teachers, we have to think about what we want our future classrooms to look like. If we decide that we want to involve this curriculum in our schools, we have to think about how we can do that and what resources we will have when doing that. As mentioned before, the Equality Act, this isn't a full set act yet. It's fairly new. That was recently passed by the House of Representatives, and it is now moving to the Senate. The act is aimed to prohibit discrimination based on sex, sexual orientation, and gender identity. It would also enable protection within education, specifically on how teachers will implement LGBTQ inclusive curriculum. This also protects teachers. So it will safeguard job protections for these teachers. And as I mentioned before, some teachers are scared to incorporate this into their curriculum because they don't feel supported by their administration. So this will empower educators to teach inclusively without the fear of being fired. So like German said, it is a little more difficult for math and science teachers to incorporate this into their curriculum. Since I am a math teacher, going to be a math teacher, it is going to be a little more difficult, but I can still show support to these students. I can mention organizations that can be helpful to them, which is what we will be discussing. So I tried to mention local organizations that are somewhere near us that can be helpful for students in the area. These can also be helpful for teachers. So the first one is called Centerlink. They work to strengthen, support, and connect LGBTQ community centers. They serve over 270 LGBTQ community centers across the country in 45 different states. They address different challenges. They try to address the challenges that centers face by helping them improve their organizational and service delivery capacity, access public resources, and engage their regional communities in social justice movements. So as I mentioned, I tried to pick local centers. So there is a center located in Visalia, and it's called the Source LGBT Plus Center. This center specifically offers a variety of services and programs, such as anti-violence materials like literature and different types of things like that. They have an art gallery, book clubs, a community meeting space, a theater. They offer yoga, they have a library, offer counseling, support groups, stuff like that. There's also different programs such as LGBT plus Health Link, which is a community-driven national network of experts or professionals working to enhance LGBT health by reducing health disparities within the community. They also offer a center action network, which enables LGBT member organizations to help shape public debate on important issues while ensuring that underserved communities have a voice. And the center's main goal is to address social, cultural, health, and political advocacy needs of the LGBTQ community members. Another local organization is the Fresno Youth Alliance, and their purpose is to promote social well-being of individuals within the LGBT community, and they do this through education and entertainment. They also promote better understanding of LGBT community by working with other segments of the general population to try and educate people. They promote and support the arts and cultural exchanges. They develop services and programs for LGBT community. They offer LGBTQ youth a safe, substance-free environment where they focus on family, friends, school, work, and they allow the youth to express their concerns as well as their achievements. And they also provide other services such as peer counseling, educational programs, networking, interacting, social activities, advocacy, etc. And they also have a Bulldog Pride Scholarship Fund at Fresno State. So you can fund the scholarship if you like. Another more popular organization is GLSEN. Even as Morgan mentioned, when she was talking, the Day of Silence that's offered in schools. That's one of GLSEN's programs that they have. But these programs, they support students and educators' motivation to change in schools. They partner with supportive educators by offering lesson plans, professional development, and more. So as was said before, it is kind of hard to know where to start as teachers, like how we can incorporate this curriculum into our classroom. So GLSEN offers this professional development for teachers if you would like to incorporate this. One of their focuses of these programs, advocacy, research, and policy work, are activating supportive educators in order to create LGBTQ inclusive classroom environments. They also advocate for inclusive and informing curriculum to offer support to LGBTQ students and to raise awareness to all students. Also passing and implementing policies to make sure that LGBTQ students can learn and thrive in safe and accepting schools, because that is very important. And they also support student-led clubs because they believe that student leaders are essential to creating community and pushing for change. As well as organizations, there are resources that can be very helpful, such as the Trevor Project, which offers 24/7 support to young LGBTQ plus people, either over a phone call, a text, or a chat. And I listed their phone number as well as the website. And there's also the Trans Lifeline, which offers emotional and financial support to members of the transgender community. And I listed their phone and their website. So even as teachers, we can provide these resources to our students. So if they feel uncomfortable going to organizations, they can use this 24/7 support to call someone. So, yeah. I don't know what to say now.
Thank you very much, everyone, for coming to our presentation and watching it. And we hope that you all learned a little something today about LGBTQ students within K through 12 schools.